Here we are, all the way from London.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to Singularity Surfers episode number 10 of 2026. And we're both in the same shot because we got a fancy new Osmo Pocket. Can highly recommend.
Yeah, but you do. So how do we deal with that?
He's a very handsome man. He just, he's not used to seeing himself all the time. Right, let's go.
What's the name of that guy that looks in the pond? He always wants to see himself in the reflection. It's a myth, a Greek myth.
Oh, yeah.
He thinks he's so beautiful. He looks always in the pond. Narcissus?
Yeah,
exactly. That's the name, Narcissus.
Yes, Narcissus. All systems are go. And cut.
Aragorn and Patrick, bold and brave, make connections, spark the change, innovation network, breaking the frame, ride the wave.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Singularity Surfers. And as you can see, we're sitting in one frame now because this is the first time we're doing this live from a couch somewhere in London during South by Southwest. How you doing?
Yeah, well, a lot better since I'm not in my boxer short outside of our apartment, locked out, nearly butt naked anymore.
This is the story. Yesterday evening, he was a little bit tired. He goes back and we have but one set of keys. So I go out to Soho with some other people here from the conference. And I go back and I was thinking, I hope he leaves his telephone on. And he did indeed leave his telephone on. He opened the door for me. We walk all the way upstairs. In his underpants, does he have the wrong keys with him? So we're locked outside of the apartment. Nearly were forced to go outside in the rain in his underwear to find a new hotel. But luckily, great support from Airbnb because they were available. They first said you could book a hotel room and we cover the expenses. But they also rang the host in the middle of the night. Host responded and steered us toward a second set of keys. So luckily we're here, but that was an interesting experience. Yeah. Never a dull moment with you.
Never a dull moment. And big shout out to the host, amazing guy. Big shout out to Airbnb for the great service. I have to admit that I feel bad that somehow Patrick has this feeling that he cannot rely on me and that I would actually not pick up my phone. But then again, I did manage to walk out of the apartment with the wrong set of keys. But in my defense, I was half asleep.
So let's talk about South by Southwest because we are now 2 days in here. We arrived on Sunday. And actually, this is interesting because Innovation Network was selected as a group of 10 startup companies by ROM Utrecht in collaboration with the Dutch Ministry from Foreign Affairs to represent Netherlands, also in the Netherlands House. So tomorrow is the big Netherlands House day, but it's fun to have 9 other companies to very closely collaborate with. And that small group is part of a bigger group called New Dutch Wave, which is about 40 companies that we had a dinner with on Sunday evening to kick it off. And well, basically, this is already with the end in mind. That was the most fun part yet, right? The people that we meet here are nice people, good conversation, a lot of networking. Overall, most of the sessions until today were a little bit below average, did not really rock our boat, right?
Yeah, it's weird because I've been wanting to go to South by Southwest for a long time. And I really had this kind of image in my mind of this being like the pinnacle of combination between arts, culture, and technology. And last year in Austin, Ray Kurzweil spoke, of course, which is obviously one of my great heroes, even though as a speaker, he can be quite tedious because he's very slow, but that's beside the point. So I was hoping to see something along those lines. And actually, I'm really happy that we started going to sessions that are not about AI. Because every single one that I went to so far was a massive disappointment because except for the one about IVF, which we'll discuss, which was really cool. Yeah. But because there's actually people on stage saying things that, to be frank, are outdated and misinformed. And this is South by Southwest. So it just, and of course now somebody calls me. And where's my phone? Oh, it's already stopped. Cool. So we can ignore it. Sorry. Yeah, so...
You're right. But everybody's also saying South by Southwest is for the serendipity. And that's also the approach that we took. So we were sitting down and the first session, okay, let's take this one, was a session about a woman who spends most of her time in Africa. Her name is Holly Budge. And she had a story about elephants that are afraid of bees. And we're like, okay, let's do that. But actually, that was one of the better stories. It was an authentic story. It was something new for me. I didn't even realize that elephants were afraid of bees. but they are using bees to draw elephants into some kind of corridor, so there are no fights between the farmers, because one elephant can kill an entire crop in one night, and it's also boosting the whole productivity and everything.
So basically, yeah. I thought it was really interesting. I think that there's some ethical considerations there because, I mean, if we would use a bee fence to keep people from breaking in, we would probably consider that abuse because the people would get stabbed by the bees, stung by the bees. So I don't really know why we think that it's totally fine for an elephant. But it is effective, and it was nice, and it is a natural solution. And it was just all in all very, very interesting and something that I would have probably never heard about if I hadn't specifically gone here and we just walked in on a session.
I was thinking by myself, can an elephant actually be stung by a bee, right? It's got a thick skin. Maybe it's just scared of something else in the animal. But yeah, we didn't get a chance to ask the question.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has a thick skin, but doesn't mean it doesn't feel
right.
But anyway, it is.
So, but then we were looking forward to the next session because the topic over there was about how much satellites can
Space race,
in the space race, right? And that's an interesting topic because we want to launch data centers in space, and there is this phrase, the Kessler syndrome, right? When there's overcrowded amount of satellites in space, can that collides with other satellites in motion and lead to a disaster in outer space. And I was really looking forward to that, but that was the most boring panel ever, right? We immediately made a decision, okay, no more panels for us. We want a good presenter on stage. We got a little bit unlucky because later we saw, you end up with panels anyway, some better panels, but this was not.
The panel on fusion energy was a lot more interesting. But the panel on fusion energy, which by the way was very, very inspiring because obviously I have, and probably Patrick as well, spoken already many times in my keynotes and online about how fusion technology is getting a major boost also from AI in how fast it's progressing. And I think that there's also an exponential development curve. And this was basically confirmed in that talk. But the reason it was a good panel was for all the wrong reasons, because again, the whole panel agreed. So there was no kind of conversation. But the woman they had there, I think her name is Jenny Kane. She's a real researcher scientist who kind of rolled into this field and is now designing full fusion reactor power plants. And she's just so excited about it, so knowledgeable about it. And she has this great energy. And she was just basically doing a keynote. And then sometimes the host was asking a question and the other guy was agreeing. But panels, it's just sad to see that even with an event like South by Southwest, they just can't get it right.
So next time, if you're doing a panel, ask this guy. Then you have some contrarian views over there. That will definitely be fireworks on stage, right? Left or right. It doesn't really matter, but you want to have a discussion there, right?
I think that's just it. I think panels, just like I believe is important for society, there needs to be different
kind of frictions.
There needs to be friction. There needs to be different opinions. People need to disagree on things because that is what opens up a conversation. That makes it interesting to listen to. I think it's a shame that it's lacking in an event like.
And then we saw something interesting because the next session was about robotics, and somebody walked on the stage. His name was Nathan Wallace. And with him, he had a Unitree robot. Well, we know that robot very well. Already a year ago, thanks to Martijn Lukart from Oddbot, we also had the privilege that we had the same robot at my book opening.
Yep.
We had him at the meetup. That it is an attention drawer. I've never seen so many people right at once standing up with the phone making videos of that. And then you see the difference between AI as we know it and physical AI. People are way more attracted to the physical AI. But then again, you probably weren't impressed at all after China looking at this specific robot, right? So what went to your mind, Sue, when seeing this?
Well, I wanted to take a video at the start because everybody got up with their mobile phones out. And I wanted to film that because it really, I know after being in China, I knew it before going to China. I know it even more after having been to China. We are light years behind in Europe with all of this. At the same time, it didn't really hit so hard until that moment where you see you're at basically one of the most famous events on technology, etc. you could go to. Everybody is here to be inspired, but people are all paying hundreds, if not thousands of euros for the tickets. So these are not poor people or people that don't get to go anywhere. They're informed. They have good jobs. They work at interesting companies. You would expect that these people would already have seen this, because these robots are nothing new. This particular model is almost being discontinued because it's an educational model, and it was just built for getting some hype, getting into universities, getting people to work with it to develop new models and test stuff. And yet it's being treated like it's like literally like it's the first humanoid in the world ever to be invented, ever to walk into a room by all of these people. And that just blew my mind because it just shows how far behind we really are.
Same, by the way, with the Waymo, right? We forgot that we actually started with the Waymo presentation, which I booked deliberately on that day, and I was expecting to get a Waymo Drive.
Yeah.
But there was no Waymo Drive. There was a Waymo car that you can look at. And of course, it's fun to see it, to see actually from up close how many cameras there are and how ugly the car becomes with all the cameras on it. And you, from my perspective, you immediately see, well, this is a model that doesn't really work. Like in China, or the robotaxis doesn't have all these big machines on it. They're basically in the car. The car has eyes to see have a worldview. Yeah, it was also a little bit of a disappointment.
Yeah. And it's funny because I said to Patrick, hey, this Waymo is a Jaguar. And it was like, yeah, so... And I was like, well, it's a model that Jaguar doesn't build anymore because they completely revamped, and this car will never be made again. So it's so weird. Like, but the weirdest thing was that these Waymo cars, they have so many cameras. There's so much shit built on top of them. And when I was in Shenzhen, I took a pony. You know, this is a company called My Pony, and they're basically the Chinese Waymo. And these are just normal cars. They have one thing on the top of the car, nothing else. And they were already driving around, like, no problem. Absolutely no problem. Perfect, super busy streets. And then everybody's talking about Waymo, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't know. Are these actually really a frontier company? Or is Waymo just well known, but are they actually already building on technology that's outdated? I don't know, man. It's
Yeah, later, while we were taking a stroll, we did see an actual Waymo without a driver in there. So there is a Waymo driving. And thinking about building it out more in London, you see everywhere these buildings. This is also the head sponsor of the whole event, right, Waymo? So they're really trying to make a push to get a complex city like London fueled with Waymo, which is a good initiative.
Yeah, but I have to say, I mean, seeing this Waymo and seeing the complexity of it all, and then knowing that Elon Musk is just already basically planning to have these robotaxis just come off the conveyor belt, 100,000 a day, and they're all, normal, cool, good-looking cars, and they just do everything.
They don't have to be adjusted to
They
become
don't
a
have
Waymo.
to be adjusted to become a Waymo. I don't know. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But I'm starting to feel that Elon is going to do something here where he's, how he's basically going to pull an Apple card. It feels to me like he's going to pull an Apple card where he's going to be late to basically enter that market, but then he's going to leapfrog over straight to the front line with his iteration of what's basically the iPhone version of a car or an autonomous driving vehicle. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then we went to an interesting session, which was actually a good presentation, a good topic, was very interesting. Stephanie Cuckoo, who gave a presentation on AI enhancement on IVF. And literally on a mission to take this technology, make it cheaper, make it more accessible for families across the world. And it was there that I found out that I'm actually sitting, of course, to one of the first IVF babies in the Netherlands.
Yeah, too weird to live, too rare to die.
I'm keeping the jokes inside, but there you go. So what do you thought of that?
Well,
session?
I thought it was super interesting because I think that, just like she said, right when we walked in, she said there's so many fields where you're already seeing all these applications of super advanced technologies for surgery, for also AI applications, for all kinds of surgeries. But IVF, which was invented basically during the 70s and introduced in the early 80s to the world. And the Netherlands was one of the earliest countries because I'm from 83 and it was introduced in the Netherlands in 82. So I was literally one of the first IVF babies in the Netherlands. But it was a super, 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 super advanced kind of technology back in the day. But since then, IVF hasn't really progressed, and it still involves, and that's what she said when we came in, it involves a lot of manual labor. People are manually basically combining these things. There's people in laboratories with needles and stuff, and that's weird because we have all these technologies like LiDAR, and she was showing LiDAR. What else was she showing? She was VLA, so vision learning systems, special robot-operated needles, etc. That could basically do all of this, do it way better, do it way cheaper, do it way more reliable than what we're currently doing. But somehow this specific thing, which is so important for people worldwide, just like my mother, who and my parents who couldn't get it normally done at the time. It's just super important. And now she's finally making headway with that.
Yeah.
So I really love that.
And
Yeah.
she also had a slide that was quite nice. She introduced a concept from Stuart Kaufman, which I was not aware of, called the adjacent possible. And that's basically the story that you're sharing. The technology was already there, but due to AI, you can go to the next chapter. So you look at what we already have as technology, because if you just imagine if we now would stop all development on AI, we will still have years of good things that we can come, or bad things, whatever you like, that can come out of that can still all deploy. And that's now happening with IVF. That really hit you as well, because systems that we have currently today, you're very outspoken about that, are not our final station.
No.
And with these changes and this technology, there are some changes on the horizon that people don't get yet, right? That's
Yeah, and this was for me really an important insight. And it sounds crazy. Realize it sounds like a foregone conclusion, but I had never heard of Stuart Kaufman. I hadn't heard about the adjacent possible ideology or idea or thesis. But basically it says you can only go to the next step. You can only invent the next thing that is the next step basically close to where you are. And I don't know if that makes it clear, but the point is that you cannot see too far ahead in the future. You can imagine certain things, but to know exactly how it's going to take place or how it will take shape, and for some things, even the concept itself will not reveal itself until you're like 1 or 2 steps away from it, because you require those earlier steps to get to the point. And I think this is such an important insight because it applies to basically everything in our world. Right? When I tell people I don't think that capitalism is going to be around 20 years from now, they're like, why, but what is going to replace it? And I have to say, I don't know. But the reason we don't know is because we need other things to be in place to get an idea of what's heading our way, of what it could be. The same goes for democracy, right? We didn't have artificial intelligence when democracy was invented. We didn't have modern communication technology when democracy and capitalism first rose in the world. We will have different technologies, different capabilities, different opportunities, and those will create new possibilities. And these are the adjacent possibilities that we couldn't see before and maybe can't see yet, but that are still in our future. So we're not at the end, we're at the start of human development for all systems.
It's basically a different lens on the law of accelerating returns. Like you look back at every technology is changing new technology, and this adjacent possible is referring to the next thing that's coming. Like a large language model, that's not, people are kind of saying, well, there are limits to the large language model, even if that is right, doesn't really matter, because it will lead to a new technology for a new industry, new business models, new interfaces, and that keeps on going.
Right? I mean, every amazing model today, and we're going to look at some benchmarks later on, which are super interesting. But current models, we still talk about large language models, but the truth is that Opus 4.5, they are large reasoning models to a large extent. They're a combination between large language and large reasoning. Why? Because when we built the first large language models, we realized that they were good at a lot of stuff, but they couldn't reason. They couldn't, they didn't understand basic logic.
And look at today. Now they can pretty good reason.
Exactly. Now they're surpassing humans in standard logic, basic logic, common sense, and in mathematics. And the only reason we got to this point is because we first came to a different point where it was bad, and that prompted us to find different solutions in that moment. And now we have these reasoning models that will open up new doors. Because what happens when an AI is better at logic, better at reasoning, better at math than any human is? Well, what happens is you get cancer treatments and cures like are literally happening right now and being rolled out.
And solving mathematical equations that humans couldn't solve for 80 years. And this is interesting because you were referring to a couple of presenters on stage that were talking about AI, but didn't really fully got the latest yet. And especially this reasoning, because a lot of people on stage are saying, well, a large language model is just a parrot that keeps on repeating what's in a database. So how wrong are you then, right?
It was absolutely, you saw me, I was about to walk out of the room because I wanted to shout shout through the room, because we had one of the guys who did the opening remarks for the talk on space waste, which by the way had no connection to AI, was a Dutch guy called Bas Woutersen. And Bas, if you're ever watching this, dude, that was a bunch of bullshit. Like literally, he went on stage, did a whole story about how large language models are stochastic parrots, And then he gave example. He had videos of AI and robots that are at least 10 years old, so they were outdated. Then he did a whole talk about statistics, which was basically a gross oversimplification of how AI models work. And then based on that, he said, yeah, they only predict the next word. And it's like, dude, where did you get this stuff? Because this is like maybe 2 years ago you could get away with saying that, but now we know factually, not because we understand the models, because we don't, which is an important part of this conversation, but because we have seen results that are impossible if it was a stochastic parrot. Because if it was just a stochastic parrot, it couldn't come up with completely novel solutions for mathematical problems that have stumped the greatest scientists in the world for the last 100 years. Okay, that's my rant.
Yeah, that's the rant. Like the era. No, you're absolutely right. In February, there was a math competition where they had 6 papers that were not published yet. So they're not in the training data. And they just asked AI, can you solve that? 5 out of the 6 were solved by AI. And it cannot come from the data. So it's logical reasoning to get to a solution. So that's where we are.
And it's creativity. I really want to emphasize that, because these people that are so badly informed and so skeptical, they also keep claiming that AI has no real creativity. But we know that AI is very, very creative. You know, there's a reason that scientists at the Institute for Advanced Science in Princeton are giving everything over to these models because the results are so mind-blowing for them. That would not be possible if AI had no ability to come up with creative new ideas or solutions.
And by the way, there are a lot of sessions here as well, Mike. Musicians using AI, artists using AI. This new blend is a heavy topic on this.
And generally, a lot of people are positive, right?
Yeah, positive about it. But most of the artists here on stage that we've seen are quite positive about the use of AI. That one of the last ones that we went to was, for instance, Mike Skinner from the streets. We will talk about it a little bit later, but he was also quite positive about the usage of AI, of the ability, what he could do with it. He didn't kind of downplay it like we see in the normal news, right?
No, but he did say on stage in front of a massive audience with Rory Sutherland, well, AI is actually really bad because once you get down to it, half of the stuff it says is wrong and is hallucinated. And I mean, no disrespect, but if you say something like that, you basically don't know AI. You haven't really used it. Otherwise, you would never come to that conclusion. If you had spent more than maybe a few hours using it, you wouldn't come to that conclusion, right? So it's just...
Now, as big fans of Rory Sutherland, we devour his videos online. The session was a bit of a disappointment. What happened is he and Mike just sat on 2 chairs and they did a fireside chat. But it looked unprepared. It looked like we just have a conversation. Like we are prepared for this conversation here. Of course, we can sit down and have a conversation, but we're not sitting in front. If you're sitting in front of 1,000 people, at least have some kind of agenda. But
it felt a little disrespectful. I mean, I love Rory Sutherland, and I literally said to you when we were in the queue, this guy has always something interesting to say. And as if the gods heard me and wanted to punish me, I literally sat through an hour-long session, and the only thing he said that remotely piqued my interest was when he said, benchmarks are for losers. Yeah. Which is a perfect bridge maybe to the next topic, I don't know.
Well, there was one thing then, we have the topic as well. Basically, what came from Mike, he highlighted the fact that when we buy a music album or a CD, the price for an album, regardless of how many times you listen to it, it's always been the same. And that is a pivot now towards streaming, because the more you stream a certain song, the more as an artist you get also paid for it. And that was interesting because I never really deeply realized that the artistry of maybe the Rolling Stones is way bigger than another band, but you still pay the same for the same album. The prices are always the same, right? That's interesting. They sell more, maybe, but why is an album from the Rolling Stones not €30 and an album from whatever we dislike, maybe a local band, €15 or something? And so usually was around the same price range.
Yes.
Exactly.
That is true, but okay, yes. I see what you mean.
I would have never thought it from that perspective.
No, but I have to say, I mean, the other side of that is, of course, that... I mean, I remember very keenly, I think it was a few years ago, that it came out that Taylor Swift had this deal with Spotify, or she was actually in a legal battle with Spotify because she wanted to get paid more for her songs. And look, on this topic, I'm always really, I feel it's really strange that so many people are so negative about streaming, negative about Spotify, because I honestly believe that as an artist, you could not have been born in a better time. I mean, 100 years ago, even before CDs, before the phonogram from Edison, the only way for people to make money from music was to perform live.
Right.
And of course, that meant that at the time there was more business for live artists maybe than there is today, because it was the only way. But then on the other hand, you couldn't reach 1 million people. People in Asia would never hear of you.
You have that platform to do it.
Today you can reach the entire world from literally from your own couch. All you need is an internet connection and a camera and a mic.
But there's a but. If you're an artist, you can theoretically get that world audience, but it's difficult to get there, and you have to pivot away from what you love to do, making music, to become a marketing engine, to play a completely different game to reach that audience. Because you can, everybody wants to achieve that, and it's taking a lot of people away from that. And Taylor Swift knows how to play that game, and she also has the power to do it. But if you're starting as a band, there comes so much marketing effort to get through the next level, to get found on Spotify in the first place.
I don't think that's true. I just don't think that's true. If I've seen I'm now no longer on social media mostly. I'm on LinkedIn, but my TikTok and Instagram activity is basically zero because I felt it wasn't doing me good. But when I did spend time on there, I saw multiple artists that were basically unknown people with a little band from some nowhere town that did some song, and they put it on TikTok and it went viral. And these people, they became pretty famous overnight, and suddenly they have a serious music career. And so I don't think that it costs a lot of marketing. What it costs is you need to make something good, something authentic, and then you send it into the world, and it needs to be picked up.
And that needs to be good. But how many good, really, really good music never reached the right reward for that quality? The same goes for writers. But isn't that exactly my point?
How many amazing artists were there 50 years ago that we never heard of? Because they simply never met the right label representative, or the label didn't want to pick them up because they thought it was shit. I mean, now you're not.
Now
dependent.
they have the possibility.
You don't need to
Before
wait.
You didn't have that.
Yeah, you don't need some Sony scout to
rip an arm and a leg out of you.
Yeah, to like you or to scout you or to find you. You're not dependent on the big label companies anymore. So, anyway,
I guess all I'm saying is in all that opportunity and the abundance, and it's also so much. You're just a drop in that big ocean, and it takes another game to kind of become a bigger drop and have effect, and that could be tiresome for people. That is a downside of all that opportunity.
Yeah, I guess that's true to some extent, but I also feel people are just, at least in the past, they could blame the music companies and the record labels and the agents because they didn't pick them up. So it wasn't their fault. Their music was great, but they were just not recognized for it. And now it's basically, well, if you're putting shit on the internet and nobody likes it, then it's just shit. Period.
All right, let's move on to the next topic, because this was an interesting session about the fusion energy. You already alluded a little bit to it. Jenny Kane and Nick Stiles on stage. And Nick had me immediately when he said poverty is the same as energy poverty. I thought it was a nice quote that he said. It got me thinking about what he meant with that. And then they had a conversation, because fusion is a technology that was still is in the future, but they were talking about this to make this practical. They are talking about private companies that really do billions of investments to make this a practical industry that we can benefit from within 3 or 4 or 5 years, which is...
What was it, 3 or 4 or 5 years?
Something like that. She said something like that.
I think she was talking about 2035, but...
which is still 7-8 years. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But... but so back to the start, I totally loved that session. And I also wrote that down because I think that statement, real poverty is energy poverty, is one of the most, it's probably one of the most profound statements you can make in our time. Because one, everybody is complaining about energy usage and AI. But by saying that real poverty is energy poverty, you're basically saying that we will always need more energy. Because we always need to, everybody has a right to energy. And as human population grows, we will need more energy, period. I mean, and this makes sense because why is the Kardashev scale basically all about energy, right? because that's the only real measure of a civilization.
Universal basic income
Yes.
becomes something like universal basic energy,
Energy.
basic intelligence.
Of course.
There are different things that everybody has a right on. Every human on the planet has a right to a
Yes.
certain amount of energy. That is more equal. That is an interesting topic from equality
Exactly,
perspective.
because everything requires energy. Food, need to make it, requires energy. Information or clothes, or it doesn't matter what you think about, it always requires energy one way or another. And so improving energy technologies and creating more energy, and therefore using more energy, is the ultimate goal of civilizational progress. And you can say, well, we want degrowth or whatever, but there's no real, at least I believe, there's no real way for any civilization to progress without a growth in energy usage and therefore growth in energy production. Yeah, I really love that. I thought it was so strong, because it completely takes away the entire argument of, AI takes too much energy. So what? Because it doesn't matter.
It takes it completely off the table. The amount of energy that because all we need for this is seawater and lithium.
Yeah.
And she explained also the process, if I got it correctly, they're using seawater for a fission, which is a process, and then they get some waste product, and that with lithium can help to get to fusion. And we can just easily create that. Every country can create that. You're not depending on a specific resource that are in the ground. There's no carbon emissions.
Nope.
Yes, 24 power.
Yep.
And a lot of power.
Yeah, and something else that she said, and I don't think a lot of people picked up on this, but she said that basically the organizations in the world that are driving this are the International Atomic Agency, or I'm probably getting the name wrong. But the thing I realized there is that we probably would have been decades ahead, not only with fission energy, so traditional nuclear power, but also with fusion technology, if we hadn't undermined this whole industry in the 80s because we were afraid and the whole world was fearful because, nuclear energy is dangerous, nuclear waste, blah, blah, blah. If we had just gone all in on that, the world would be cleaner, better, in every single way today. We would have so much less problems. So
let's not make that mistake again.
Let's not make that mistake again. Let's not have our fear take over and lead us to irrational decisions about the future of our civilization and the technologies that can improve it.
Yeah. So after that, you have to understand there are 1,200 speakers here at this conference. So you get an app, and then you have to scroll to all this small text, and we are continuously checking which was the next. And there was a guy talking about the augmentation of our vision, and it had a little bit of a boring description. But it turned out to be a pretty interesting talk, not by the way he presented himself, but I'm talking about a guy called, what's his name? Let me see if I can find it. Roman Axelrod. And he founded a company called XPANCEO. It was completely new for me, but what they're bringing to market is a real smart contact lens, which is interesting. He had one slide up there where he basically said we moved from mainframe to a PC, to a smartphone, to a smartwatch, to smart glasses, getting closer and closer to our technology, and now he has a contact lens. What I really liked about the story is that there was a point in his presentation that he actually, and it's difficult to demonstrate this of course, he had the contact lens in some kind of magnifier pointed at the audience, and then you saw what the contact lens is displaying on your retina if you look into the audience in this case. They had 27 different, or 26, something like that, prototypes. But he's pretty far advanced. He got 1.3 billion investment. He got that was his evaluation.
Yep.
He raised 250 million based in Dubai, and they want to bring this product in 2027 to the market. And I was not expecting a product like that.
That's pretty soon.
It's pretty soon.
But yeah, I think that this is going to be along the same lines of, the first smart glasses. It's basically going to be a product for super early adopters, and probably most of these people will only wear it a few times, or it's for people or studios or companies that want to experiment with this tech to get ahead of the curve, right? Because that's also what happens a lot these days. There's still lots of companies using Apple Vision Pro, even though that's not even, being developed anymore, because they're still developing something that, they want to develop further in the future, because they expect that virtual reality will continue to develop itself, obviously. Yeah. It was very interesting, very cool, and of course, right up my cyberpunk-ish alley. I love that stuff.
No, exactly. But then you have the smart glasses, the brain-computer interface. This is the next phase of our interaction with computers, right? Voice is also this big leap everywhere where we go, and where I talk to people about Whisperflow. It's a simple tool, but I think I love that tool the most. It kind of 4x's me on my production by just talking. Finally, we have these different interfaces that take me away from typing slowly. It's the same bridge from a T9 that we have the short message with T9 to a normal keyboard. Now we can just narrate, and then we again have 4xx, right? And if you can do it with your brain or have things immediately in your eye, that just makes it more easy to interact with your AI.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yep.
Anything more to talk about that?
No, I think that brings us to new interfaces, new ways of interacting with new technologies.
Yeah. I saw an interesting X-post from Kitty Mayo, and it was a short video from a new startup in, I think it's Norwegian. The founder is called Agnesa Pedersen, and she flew a drone by brain signals. So, like, complete thing on our head and controlling the brain. And we have talked about this technology many times. We even had a lady that is controlling video games with her mind. So the technology is not new, but it's fun to see that somebody is now at the stage of really making an application that is a company behind it and is ready for scale usage. And there are many more of these appearing on the horizon, also close to 2027. We finally have more brain-computer interfaces that consumers can start using, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that in the Netherlands, I know Rian Dings, and Rian is also experimenting with this, and she is probably going to be in the mini docu series that I'm making for DPG and RTL Z, because basically she's working where they build a setup where you can mind control these little robots that drive around. And her perspective on this is very interesting. She says, people claim that AI is making us more stupid because we're not doing certain things anymore with our brain. But by doing this, by creating new interfaces with technology, we have to use our brain and we have to really kind of develop certain abilities with it. And this is a perfect example of what I always say as well, because evolutionary, we humans, we have a tailbone, but we don't have a tail, right? Why not? Because we don't need it anymore. And we have parts of our brain, the reptilian brain, as we call it, the limbic brain. Is that the limbic brain? Yeah, it's the limbic brain. And we still use it for some things, but once it was way bigger because we used to do way more with it.
But it's still there a bit?
It's still there a bit.
Covered with the prefrontal cortex?
Exactly, because we developed new parts of our brain. And so when people say, yeah, but AI is making us dumber, I'm like, is it really? Or are we changing our environment with technologies that simply change the requirements of what we need to be able to do, because we have better ways of doing things that we used to do ourselves before, and we're better adapting to a new environment, and therefore we develop certain different abilities with our brain as well, right? And
I like so much what you're now saying, because there's this trend and a lot of articles about brain fry, which of course is a real thing, because the way that we work is also, I wouldn't recommend it to everybody to spend so much time on it. I see it myself, but I see it as a transition period in also reconfiguring your brain, reprogramming your brain, using the plasticity of your brain to use it in a different way and get smarter in combination with AI as a result of that. And if I can control my computer with my brain, I literally have to do that, right? I've used a couple of these things, and you have to think about a square, you have to think about a circle, you have to think about certain specific thoughts that your brain can pick up, and that is how you control your device. So you're flying a drone, you have to really think, okay, that's where I want to go, and then the drone picks that up. So it's a completely different way of thinking. And that will go further, right? Because the moment that we can brain control our thoughts, that will kind of open completely about how we reuse our brains, right?
Of course. And there's the two things I want to say on this. One, think about how our interactions with AI have changed. For example, so many things. Now you can code without needing to write code. Why? Because you can just express yourself in normal language, which took all these hobbles away, to an AI, and the AI will understand what you're doing, what you want to do, and the AI will then translate that into what you need. Now imagine that we take another hobble away. Instead of having to actually express it in words, we can just think what we want, imagine it, and the AI understands that. And from that, it builds what we need. That's where we're headed. That's one. Secondly, there's a famous interview with Steve Jobs where he says technology basically is about enabling people and exponentially increasing our abilities. And he takes the example of the bicycle. He said, they did a ranking of efficiency, energy efficiency for transportation, and humans were all the way at the bottom. And then they added the bicycle. And by humans put on a bicycle, we instantly went to the very top of energy efficiency for transportation, because it basically multiplies how far we can go and how little energy we require to do something.
It's a great story.
It's a great story. It's a great story. And it is such a good metaphor because AI is the same, right? But to be good on a bicycle is different than to be good as a runner, right? There's plenty of people who go bicycling and they would not go very far in a marathon, right? Because it requires different muscles, different training, different ability. So the same thing is true now for AI. And the problem here is benchmarks, and we're going to get to benchmarks. The problem with benchmarks is that benchmarks is just...
Benchmarks are for losers, huh?
Benchmarks are for losers in some sense because they are only testing what we think or what we needed in the past, and therefore now think we need again in the future.
Right.
But very often what we need in the future or what we're going to be doing in the future might be very
novel,
different, and it's something that you cannot benchmark against yet. So I'm not saying that all benchmarks are useless, but I'm saying that especially when it comes to these technologies, we need to be open to the fact that maybe we can't always understand how it will positively benefit us, and just by saying, okay, we no longer need to do this or we can't do this anymore because we're using it, doesn't necessarily mean that that's bad for us.
No, exactly. I recall that management from Salesforce at the time that I was running the innovation network department over there was continuously asking about business cases. Yeah. My answer was always the same. The moment you can measure exactly what we're doing on innovation, there's no innovation anymore. Yeah. Then it's ready for exploitation by your department, right? And then you build a business case because I'm going to do something else. And that's the same with what was meant with the benchmarks, which is different from the benchmarks on AI, which do serve a purpose. But to get something novel, you cannot measure it yet because it's novel.
And it's funny because the guy who came before Rory Sutherland, I think he actually said something. What was his name? Ramanar or something. He was. Wasn't he from?
He wrote a book.
He was from Mastercard.
Exponential marketing. Quantum marketing.
Quantum marketing. Yeah. And he worked at Mastercard, I think, or he helped them rebrand. But he said something very interesting. He said, even today, most companies don't know what the return on investment of their influencer marketing is. Even though everybody knows that influencer marketing is super important, you can't do any marketing without influencer marketing, but it didn't exist 10 years ago. Influencer marketing didn't exist, and there's still no benchmark for it. And so it's still very much underestimated sometimes by companies how important it is to do this right. Yeah, and I think that's a perfect metaphor again for how, new technologies and new situations require different approaches that might not always be best reflected by saying, okay, yeah, we're testing on this because we always needed that and we're doing really bad at it. I mean, I don't need to be able to be good at math, right? Or calculus in my head like my parents needed to be. It's not required for me in my world.
So this is also a topic that I've been dying to discuss with you. I want to discuss a little bit more with your point of view on the amount of job loss. I think we both agree on the fact that there will be some kind of job loss. But lately things have been moving a little bit. And I'm also, like for instance Dario Amodei and Sam Altman, changing my perspective a little bit. They've both been in the news saying this job apocalypse, as they call it, is shifting or maybe not happening. We think a little bit further ahead because I think the robotics will have a big impact. But if I look to my day-to-day, I am just X more productive. And I can also see a world where more people, the entire world gets 10x more productive without the fact that we have to lay off more people. And an interesting perspective came with the use case of coding. Because if that impact of all the vibe coding that we see now, why do we not see the impact on the real job loss yet? What we have predicted 2 years ago is still not happening. The amount of people that are being hired as a developer actually went up, specifically in the number one use case that is out there for coding. So I was wondering, do you see the same or do you have a different feeling on that? It might be not so bad as we thought 2 years ago. What do you think?
I think that first of all, the reason that they're changing their tune is because of the rising negative sentiment around AI.
Is that it? Or an,
There is
or an
massive-
upcoming IPO?
There's an upcoming IPO. There's a massive rise in negative sentiment. There was literally this morning on LinkedIn, I watched a video of an Asian actor from America at Harvard graduation, and the first things out of his mouth were "fuck AI."
Yeah, and we talked about it a couple
And
of
then
weeks ago as well, with the
Yes.
AI getting booed off stage.
Yes, because exactly. Eric Schmidt, former Google CEO, was booed off stage when he talked about AI. And the funny thing, this one as well, graduation speech, he said, "fuck AI." And everybody in the audience was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, good, because I prepared a whole different speech in case you guys didn't agree with me, but now I can skip that." And he went all in on hating on AI. And he literally said, and it was a combination between some jokes and comedy and real, but he said the whole purpose of this generation is to destroy AI. That's what he said on stage. So coming back to your question, I think that the only and absolutely the only reason that these very prominent AI CEOs and researchers are saying the impact on jobs will not be so bad is because they realize that if they actually tell people what is going to happen, nobody will understand that it's a good thing and everybody will hate them for it.
Dario has been saying that for 2-3 years, quite heavily, and he is building the most successful company maybe ever, as it looks right now. So he came that far with that tune. So why change now?
Well, because the waters can change, and the waters are changing now. The sentiment is starting to change. There's a whole new generation of people out there, new consumers, that are starting to change how they feel about AI. And so he needs to change course before it's too late. And the same goes for Sam Altman. Coming back to what you said, we're not seeing that. That's also something I highly doubt. Because, for example, here you have some stuff about banks, right? Well, the European banks reported that they expect to hire 5% more people, yes?
I don't know.
I think
if you say so.
in the latest report, the European banks, this was a research or report by Goldman Sachs, I think, or McKinsey, I think it was Goldman Sachs. And European banks reported they expect to hire 4% more people in terms of AI engineers, etc. What they didn't say is that they literally just 2 months ago fired at least 10,000 people across the whole banking industry in Europe. So they're counting from the moment they already got rid of 10,000 people, because now they're replacing those people with AI engineers, and then they're counting it as a growth in their employee base.
And you're right about that. But then I start thinking about, is that not using AI to get rid of a lot of bloating or fat in the organization anyway, right? These type of organizations have so many people and they can afford it for a long time, but it's also a great opportunity to lay off people. So all the tech companies have this. Every 2-3 years they have this 10% layoff, and so far we only seen that 10% layoff at companies. Only some extremes like Block have done a little bit more, but the rest is not taking that extreme measures that I would have expected the second half of this year, personally.
I think that if anything, we ourselves, despite being very into all of this, we underestimated the curve of this exponential change. I think we expected to be already in the knee of the curve of the impact
there.
of AI, and we're still on the early. And when it hits all at the same time, because.
I think you're right there, because if you look at why Anthropic is now growing so fast, is because finally there's enterprise adoption. You see all the fast-moving companies adopting, but not getting the ROI yet, because it takes a little bit while to get the products in place and all the things in place, and afterwards the big wave will come. But yeah,
all the trainings, all the masterclasses that are being sold right now, because nobody knows how to use it. Like, we're here at South by Southwest, the most prominent technology and culture event in the world, and of the 10 people I saw on stage, 5 thought that AI was a stochastic parrot and was actually really bad, right? People don't know shit. Sorry to say this, but they just don't know shit about it. They've never used it properly. They're not there yet. And so I think that, if anything, we underestimated how fast that adoption would take place and how fast people would be able to kind of get into this technology and grasp it. The reason that Anthropic went from 1 billion at 1st of January this year to over 60 billion right now in revenue, right? This is ludicrous, by the way. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is a ludicrous amount of revenue growth. But that means that all of those companies that bought Claude and Anthropic, they barely have been using it for a few months. So how can we possibly expect these companies to already have these massive changes in their productivity? Because let's go back to the 90s when people started to use personal computers and the internet. Most people were like, holy shit, what is this? This is super difficult. How am I going to use that? And yes, the entry bar to AI is lower, but the ceiling is significantly higher because you really need to start understanding how these AIs work, build your own agentic kind of workflow. It needs to have access to the data. There's so much that involved with that.
And first, they're gonna burn a lot of money.
They're gonna burn a lot of money.
And that is also gonna get a negative point of view. Yeah, you see this news happening everywhere. The bills for AI are too high. I'm not getting the return on investment. And that will also be a way for people will say something negative about AI, only to discover that after all that phase of experimentation, something else is happening, is occurring, this adjacent next thing. So that is also.
Absolutely.
Before we go to that, I just wanted to share a story about the ABN AMRO, because that was a note about. What was interesting is that that's a Dutch bank, the ABN AMRO. It's a big bank. They laid off indeed thousands of people. And actually the guys from Speed of Learning, where we work with, they have a specific program for people who are being laid off to help them to understand AI and how they can use AI to finding a new job or new opportunity. And this is, if you look at the math of this, so they have laid off thousands of people. And then they open this training already for months. And this is only the second training. First was just a small group, and now again, I've fought 15 people or something like that. I only did, it's a 3-day training. I only did the keynote. But a couple of observations. First of all, that's just 1% of the people that freely subscribe to something that the bank is paying for. This is just an opportunity to learn. And why are not hundreds of them subscribe to something like that? But the fun thing is, and I didn't realize that 1%, they want to go. They want to go. They understand that something is happening. They don't know what it is exactly. Of course, they know this AI, but the depth of it, and they're interesting to see how deep it really goes. And that was the attitude I like. We're all the type of people that I connect with that really are the trailblazers, the aanjagers that one of had. Hence, it was also a very successful training because they were just completely open-minded and said, give me more. I like that. I just wanted to share the story. And if you ever, maybe you are confronted with layoffs in your company, know that the training also exists. It's a little bit of a different training from the vibe coding masterclass that we have.
Well, this is a great opportunity for anybody listening or watching now. And it doesn't need to be only in the Netherlands. Maybe the US is a little bit far away, but I'm happy to come over there. But we have our Exponential Executive Masterclass, which is specifically for board level executives to learn and actually hands-on use agentic AI the real way, right? So none of that, I used ChatGPT once bullshit. We have the Vibe Code Masterclass for all other professionals that want to take this serious. If you want to get ahead of the curve and 10x your capabilities and really understand this technology, this is for you. And if you're in the banking industry or being laid off or for whatever reason you kind of want to step in on that, then our boys from Speed of Learning are the way to go. I cannot recommend this enough, and I know it's our product, but I wouldn't say this if I didn't really believe in it, because we were discussing today how we don't care about money enough. That's just the truth.
No, it's about the change. It's about making sure that the change happens the most positive way we can, right?
Yeah.
And that also requires guidance, knowledge sharing. That I don't need to make a summary. Knowledge sharing is the most important thing.
And it's really my conviction that maybe things are not progressing as fast as we expected them, but in the next 2 years, you will see an increasing number. And when it starts to happen, it's going to go really, really fast of people that are suddenly getting companies that are exploding, where they're a single contributor with an army of AI, and suddenly they have a 100 million euro company or a billion euro company. And every other professional is going to see that they can be so much more productive if they just use AI right. But the thing is that even with agentic AI, I use Claude Code every day, so does Patrick, but there's still a kind of bar to technical kind of understanding you need of how to do it, and you need to overcome your fear of trying it out. I mean, even the people that we work with that are so good with this, they're still really afraid of giving it complete, freedom to do what it could do, because they still feel it's risky. All of this is part of the process. We're really just children getting on the bicycle for the first time, and we're not really, we're definitely not the Tour de France level yet, but we're going to get there, right? We're going to get there.
Exactly. You're staying in the bicycles metaphors today. So let's talk about token usage, because we both have a slide in a slide deck where we kind of talk about the price of tokens is going exponentially down. And it did, right? 400x less in 2 or 3 years' time. But the token usage on the other hand is more than 400x increased because we're using so much, we're using agents, and all that rational thinking that we're talking about is not an AI just using a couple of tokens to pick an answer from a database. No, it's an AI taking multiple paths, looking at a logical conclusion, firing off lots of tokens to get to that conclusion. And if you have an agent doing that X or 100x, then yeah, you can do the math. That's how you do token maxing and how you really spend a lot of money and bring it to Dario Amadei, right?
Yeah,
that's what's happening here.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that the models, the frontier models, are not necessarily getting cheaper. So even though the price for the same intelligence goes down 99% year over year, the problem is that nobody wants to have last year's model.
No.
So everybody wants to be in the newest Gemini or the newest
Who
Claude.
uses 4.7?
Exactly. Like 4.7 was the hot shit last month, and now nobody wants to use it, right? And the same goes for Gemini 3.1 Pro is now surpassed by 3.5 Flash. Nobody wants to use Pro and now in this case, Flash is actually, I think, cheaper than Pro because it's a Flash model. But it's still significantly more expensive than 3.1 Flash was, right? So, yeah, it's just this is also an interesting thing to see. And the question really here is how long and how fast will these models that are generally used by everybody keep increasing their capabilities enough to kind of justify that price increase? And how fast will the price of the intelligence on the frontier go down over the next few years? I mean, if you're having an AI that is 200 IQ or 210, then does it really matter anymore? Is a question you might ask. And
well, there's a differentiation story, right?
Yeah.
For me at the moment, it still matters, right? So bring it on. 4.9 MIFOS, I'll take it as long as I can pay it. I'll take it, right?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but that's exactly the point I'm trying to make, I guess. For AI intelligence to become ubiquitous, where it's everywhere in everything, it needs to be really cheap. But it also needs to have a minimal level of intelligence so that it can do whatever it's required to do there.
Right, yeah.
And yeah, so all of that plays into it.
And there are interesting stories, right? So this is a funny story to share. There's some unknown company out there, and I'm really curious to what it is. They blew 500
Yeah,
million.
one guy.
Well, no, one guy forgot to put the limits on the licenses for employees.
Yeah.
So if you don't put a limit on, and then you say entire company can use Claude, which is something that we've been advocating for. A lot of companies are now finally installing Claude, giving it to every employee. But if you make a mistake like that, it's disastrous, right?
Yeah, and it's not just, I mean, this is a guy 500 million, but I made a promise to one of my best friends because one of my best friends, and he made me promise to make it impossible to figure out who it is. But in his company, his colleague was working with Claude overnight, solving a problem for a client, and basically set a goal and then went to sleep and didn't check. And the next day, the Claude burned 7,000 euros fixing a bug because it got stuck in some kind of loop and there was no budget set. So there was no point at which Claude said, okay, I've tried enough times now. I need to go back to my human to ask, should I continue doing this? And this, the funny thing is I had to laugh quite hard because obviously it's not nice for them, but it was an important lesson for this company because they realized, okay, shit, this can be really great, but if we don't properly set it up. And coming back to our earlier conversation about seeing AI really take jobs and really transform the market, as long as developers, professionals who've been doing this their entire life don't even understand that with an AI you need to set a budget that tells you everything you need to know about how mature our usage of this technology is.
But you find out the right thing. This is a lesson, and people are learning from that. I've got another article here that the Uber CEO told that in 4 months' time they've burned through the entire budget for 2026 that he reserved for coding. So he goes all in and they burn it. But what happens, of course, all these developers start using it and everybody is creating a lot of code, but it has to go to a funnel to a meaningful product. There's Ivan Malik pushed this graph out. So lines of codes in a period of, I cannot see it here on the slide, but let's assume it's the past 2 years, has X'd 2,000% more of lines of code. But then you see to how much ultimately has been released, that's just 1.3. That's because everybody is playing, experimenting, so you have to adapt to the new processes, find new ways, what is effective, how do we share things, and not let everybody of the company create a fitness app. Why would you need within a company 1,000 fitness apps, right?
And what is a release? Because, I mean, look at me. I never wrote a line of code in my life until March this year. And now I have 2,500 Git repo commits. But 90% of that is for my personal software, for my software stack, for stuff that I don't share with other people. So there is no release. There's no release. I'm not releasing it to anybody. I'm just making shit for myself, and I'm happy if it works 80% of the time because it's custom made for what I want, and I don't have to pay anybody for it, and I love tinkering, right? And so every person that kind of understands agentic AI will be doing this. And funny, we talked about earlier about how, using your brain and the multitasking, the new capabilities required to use AI. My ADHD now seems to be a massive advantage because I can juggle up to 15 different Claude Code sessions, which can go up to 80 different sub-agents running to do projects. And I keep skipping between them, and I don't get the brain fatigue that normal people get because I've already my entire life been switching from thing to thing to thing all the time because my executive dysfunction doesn't work like that of a normal person.
So he can do that, but he cannot bring the right keys to the front door. So he stands in his underpants at the door. But that's a completely different story.
No, exactly. But this also means that there's lots of people like me that are doing 100,000 things now for themselves, experimenting, playing, figuring things out in this kind of sandbox of their own making, and none of this goes to commit.
It's learning money.
It's learning money.
That's interesting. Not everything goes to commit, but there's also something else. We also have the traditional backlog that you have as a software development, or even within a company. If you are in HR or in marketing and you want something to change, there's a whole chain of people involved getting it all the way back to IT and maybe even to a developer of the software before you finally get in the next release something new. That doesn't happen. Aragorn walks here on the street, and if his AI is not performing the way he just gives instructions right away on the go, and the system is kind of rewriting in as it comes home, so it's fixed. Yep. So that's basically how that works as well. So this is a completely different paradigm that we're entering right now.
Yeah. And I mean, sure, people say, well, but you can't do that with corporate, enterprise software.
Well, why not?
Why not is the right question, but also maybe not today. But it wasn't possible for you. I mean, I write my own custom apps for everything now. That also wasn't possible a year ago. So to say, yeah, but you can't do that for enterprise software. Yeah, that's true today, but it will not be true a year from now or 2 years from now. I can't say exactly how fast it will go. But at some point, enterprise software will be literally run by a single guy from a Claude Code session or something on his phone, and he will be at South by Southwest, taking care of a software product that is being used by millions. And of course, they'll still probably have production versus live environment, but that's all it's going to require.
Or even a step further, that the AI is proactively advising, hey, we have created this process, but I see some improvements, and I suggest a couple of improvements for the process, and then you are here talking to people, discussing what's the best decision, and then you say, yes, we'll take option B and forget about option C and implement it right now.
I wouldn't be amazed. Like traditionally, you want a feature or you want some software, you have to go to your IT department, you have to get approval, you have to get a budget, you have to get, 1,000 people have to agree with you, and then there is a whole integration implementation process. I wouldn't be surprised to see that in 2 years from now, you'll be running some kind of self-vibe-coded enterprise software that basically has an AI agent for every employee in your company, where whenever somebody's working with it, they basically give feedback to that AI. They say, well, this is not working the way I wanted. This could be better. I would love this feature. And instead of having a whole approval process, and instead of having all these people involved, there will be some central mind AI responsible for enterprise stack, which is basically taking in all the feedback and then turning that into brand new features that might even be custom made for that specific employee and only turned on for them. So it becomes a literally self-evolving, self-developing, almost living kind of organic software stack. That's 100% where we're going to head.
Absolutely. So how about we wrap it up and go back to the conference center?
Yeah.
See if we can learn some more.
Yeah, I'm finally over my hesitation for having another beer as well, I think.
I'll take the keys. I'll take the keys with me.
You take the keys.
Hey, but thanks for listening. I hope this was worth your time. And if it was, please do share it within your company, within friends. You can really help us out to get more reach and get this important message out there. We have a Substack that you can follow. So you also have the written content. That is innovationnetwork.substack.com, where you can subscribe. And that's how you become a Singularity Surfer.
Exactly. So, innovationnetwork.substack.com, www.exponential-executive.nl, exponential executives, www.lockout.nl. I'm going to put it all here because this is all for everybody that really wants to, surf towards the singularity. That's it for episode number 10 of 2026. And like they say in the Netherlands,
we are in London actually. Now they just say, see you later. But how do they say it in the Netherlands?
bold and brave, making
Zie je later.
Zie je later.
Dat is toch wel een hele toffe opname.